of student debt for economically distressed borrowers. That is a limited partial cancellation. And of course, we know what's going on with the HEROES Act, with the Senate, et cetera. We're still waiting to see what happens. Trump's executive order of just a couple of weeks ago had instructed Secretary of Education Betsy DeVos to suspend student loan payments and interest on loans held by the DOE until December 31st. However, it's unclear if or how this extension is going to be honored and which types of loans will qualify. It was extremely vague, and I'm not sure exactly which loans are going to qualify, if any loans are going to qualify, if this, how that's actually going to work, because it was an executive order and not really a bill that was fleshed out and discussed. So I want to start with Dawn this time in terms of discussing the government responses, and get some thoughts from the other panelists as well in terms of what do you see from your vantage point working from the Debt Collective? What do you think is going to happen on October 1st? And what do you think is possible? And what can and should we push for right now in this uncertain time with COVID-19?
Oh, boy. I work so deeply in this every day, and I'm so just continually disappointed in what they do. So one thing that I do know from individuals that have been deferred, like on collections through the moratorium, talking to the FSA call centers, the Federal Student Aid call centers and whatnot, they're expecting a firm and aggressive recollection on October 1. So people that are currently stabilized will have aggressive collections proceedings resume October 1st. They're going to continue to garnish. They're going to continue to send them to collections, and especially with private student loans. So one thing about private student loans is it does not have the same protections as federally held. And if they're held by other lenders, it just gets messy. Most students with private student loan have seen zero big donut in relief. There's been no support. Their credit is getting trashed. So October 1, I expect a lot of people to go into panic and despair, and we're organizing for that to support them. I don't know what else to say other than to continue to go over and over the harmful stories that we deal with. But again, this is impacting households. So it's not just the individuals that are going to be harmed come October 1st. It's going to be entire households. We also have students I know that are trying to figure out their attendance for the next semester. There, for example, I know of some students that are actually going to not attend school because COVID impact on their household means family members can't work. So they're going to leave university and go back to work as a frontline worker, as an essential worker, putting themselves again at risk for COVID because they can't do both, right? So the lack of an actual proper stimulus to get people checks, these moderate protections. The only thing that I want to say that's good about the moratorium was that it demonstrated the government does, even Mr. T, has the ability to do something about these payments if they so choose. They can wave their little magic wands. So how about October 1, they just cancel it all of it. Like every single penny, erase the 1.7, and then October 2nd, we'll start planning for that next day, the day after. And what do we do once it's canceled? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dawn. Dr. Newfield or Pam, would you like to comment on this topic?
I'll just say very quickly, adding on to what Dawn said at the end, the bad news is it's going to take a social movement. The political process that we have right now, particularly Mitch McConnell's Senate, is not going to be enough. I think he's going to keep heroes bottled up until the last possible minute, which is the bad news. The good news is, in terms of the social movement part, is I have not spoken to anyone in the last year who is not in favor of both the cancellation and the free part of this. In other words, when you say, well, we have free high school, and we've had it for, most states for 120, 140 years, that was the obvious way to give people equal access and not penalize people because they came in with lower incomes. Why don't we do that with college? Everybody says, yeah, I don't know. We should, especially because college is now the gateway to the economy, kind of the ante-in, rather than as an extra special thing that it was in, say, 1900. So I think the good news is that this is, as you were saying before, this is really popular, and I think it's only a matter of time and organization before we make major progress on both the cancellation and the free tuition parts.
Thank you. Pam, if you'd like to say something real quick, because you're about to, Dr. Newfield, about to segue into the other topic. Go ahead, Pam.
I just want to say what I think is going to happen in October is there's going to be a lot of people wondering how are they going to live, because you're going to get, I know for me, my student loan starts payment in October, and the amount of money they want me to pay is outrageous. And then you're going to be put into a position of, do I pay my student loan? Do I pay my rent? Do I pay my car note? I can't pay all three. So now we're going to be picking and choosing. And, something tragic is going to happen because of that. And I think that the good thing is what Dawn originally said, is that the government has shown that during this COVID crisis that they can do what they want to do, and that it can be done. So it's not, oh, we don't have the money, or we don't have the means, or, how are we going to facilitate this? It can be done, and it can be done quickly. So.
Thank you so much, Pam. And this is, I think this is, COVID-19 has shown us so many things that are possible that people didn't think were possible before. So now it's time to really push on that and really insist that we get the things that we need, because we know that we can. Of course, the whole student debt issue leads us to a whole bigger issue, which is why we have to pay for public education at all. Bernie Sanders made tuition-free public higher education a pillar of his extraordinary campaigns in 2016 and 2020, and it's definitely a priority topic on the minds of students, parents, and families today, as our economic future is highly uncertain. So, Dr. Newfield, you've been watching and writing on the topic of public higher education for a long time now, at least since I was an undergraduate at UCLA over a decade ago. I've been following your blog this whole time. So I just wanted to pose this to you. The mythic logic behind student debt, as we all know, is the assumption that student loans are an acceptable or desirable risk, an investment in higher education, so that it leads to a good job, which will pay off the cost of the loan eventually. Can you explain the problem with this logic, and also how the issues of debt cancellation and tuition-free college are bound up together, and how addressing both together can benefit us all?
Yes, thank you. I wanted to say at the top that I'm part of a group called Reclaim the Master Plan in California, which is it's a free college group, among other things. And one of its main partners is the Council for University of California Faculty Associations, or CUFA. And I think many of the members of this group are on the call. The president of it, Constance Penley, I think, is here, the executive director, Eric Hayes, members from other campuses. So there's a bit of there's a base for moving these arguments forward, I think, in California and most other places. Your first question, the one sentence answer to the flaw with the return on investment logic is that only a small piece of the overall value of a college degree is private monetary benefit. And that the emphasis on what debt does is it turns it into a return on investment calculation that you have to make, so that you're basically looking at it in terms of the salary increment that you get when you get a college degree, as opposed to what you would have gotten if you dropped out or if you'd just gone through to high school. Most of the value of a university degree is some combination of non-monetary, so the creation of citizens, improved health, all these, a bunch of other qualities are also very important, or social. So when we reduce college down to the return on investment, we're only valuing a small part of it, And then we're forcing individuals rather than society, which gets the majority of the benefit, to pay the cost, right? So there's two things that are going on here. One is that we're misunderstanding what college is even for society, and most of it is public and non-monetary. And then secondly, we're making students unfairly bear the lion's share of the total cost of producing this social good. And it just, as I said before, we've never made previous sort of post-World War II generations do this. And there's no justification for making millennials or Zoomers pay for it. I'm reluctant to hitch debt cancellation to free college because they're both big lifts. And so part of me thinks, okay, well, let's do one thing at a time. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you 6 reasons why I think it actually may be the moment to connect them. And also, in addition to the fact that they're also logically connected. Okay, so I'm just going to go through these quickly. And if there are any questions or discussion, I'm happy to go into more detail. So question, why free college on top of debt-free college, debt cancellation? The first reason is it's the only way to maintain debt-free college, right? If tuition continues, then debt is going to start piling up again to cover it. So we'll have other generations that are facing the same problem that the current one is. Number 2, free college is the only way to do real college, as it's sometimes called, that is college without student poverty, without hunger, without houselessness. And the reason for this is that if financial aid is not paying for per tuition, all of it can be shifted over to cover all of the costs of attendance, so that students won't be paying tuition, and then their financial aid can be 100% allocated to covering their costs of living and housing and food, et cetera. Third, why free college on top? It's the only way to ensure proper state funding effort. Historically, college tuition hikes have given states an excuse to cut funding all around the country, and to do this for decades. State legislatures need to be deprived of this austerity excuse for cutting. And if they don't have tuition there that can be raised over here, they will have a much harder time politically cutting university allocations over there. Number 4, free college connected to debt-free is the only way to do anti-racist college. And what you see around the country is that state investment per student has fallen as the white share of the student population has fallen. And at the University of California, the relationship between white share going down and state per capita income going down has been almost lockstep over the last 20 years. So white public colleges had free tuition, and we should have exactly the same thing for public colleges that are minority majority. 5th, free college is the only way to get high quality college for all, for everybody, regardless of whether they're in community college or local, regional, or flagship. And the reason for that is that free college would take away, what we could call the tuition concealment or the veiling of how unequally allocated money is to different kinds of colleges within states. So it will increase the likelihood of equal allocation. So we won't have the current problem, which is poor students going mostly to poor colleges who can spend less money on their education. That is the case at the richer public colleges that can spend much more and that have a higher share of richer and also of white students. Reason number 6, free college on top of debt college is really cheap. The California example, the Reclaim the Master Plan group that I mentioned, calculated that to return the entire 3-part system back to 2000, that is, so increasing state allocations to the level that they were at then, and then also dialing tuition back to 0, which is below where it was in 2000. The total cost to the median taxpayer on top of their current income tax would be $66 a year. It's more for higher brackets, but for the regular folks, it's 66. For low-income people, it approaches 0. It's completely affordable in California, and if you did this calculation in your state, you'd find something very similar. Nationally, I did a somewhat different calculation looking at what it would cost to take 1,100 already low-cost colleges, dial their tuition down to zero, and then massively increase the amount of money that each student gets for their education to $20,000 per student per year, which is a lot more than what it's basically double what 4 years are spending now. Okay, so here's what there's a few numbers. We are currently at all levels of government spending $175 billion a year, which is nothing as a share. It's a 1%, 2%, 3% of all government expenditures. To adopt the Bernie Sanders debt-free plan, a debt cancellation plan, would cost about 47, let's just round it off at $50 billion a year on top of that. To take 1,100 colleges that serve 5 million students, put the tuition at zero, increase the per student allocation to 20,000, would be another 50 billion a year. So we would get free college and high quality college for 5 million students, debt cancellation for everybody by taking government expenditures on higher education from 175 to 275 billion a year. So it's like a drop in the bucket. When you think about the CARES Act and the other bailouts that we've been talking about, you can see what a tiny amount of money it is. I'll just finish by saying that, I mean, I'm a third generation born and raised in Los Angeles. My parents were first generation college, and the only reason that they went to college was because it was free in the 1950s. And it completely changed their lives, and it changed my life. What I want is the same transformative higher education for college when college is 70% students of color that we already had when college was 85% white. So my argument is we have to do both debt-free and debt cancellation and free college. And the good news about this is that it's really cheap, it's completely affordable, and it's politically feasible now. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Don or Pam, would you like to speak to this question too of tuition-free and debt-free college combined together?
I will go. Sorry if I'm cutting you off, Pam. I can't see it. So, yeah, I mean, let's hear from the experts and let's just get it done. That's my thought. Okay, we had this available. I've seen slideshows and heard academics speaking about when Reagan was governor, and this was his response to when the Black and Brown came and we're like, hey, we want a part of that education too. He was like, okay, so then pay for it. And then here we get means testing and the FAFSA and whatnot. So I don't have much big intellectual thoughts on it other than it needs to be done yesterday, 20 years ago, right? We're behind, we're neglecting to just do what needs to get done, period. Where lives are being just trashed every single day. We even have people that are dying because they go into default, their wages are being garnished, and they can't afford to go get medical attention because they're tied up in the debt garnishment, whatever. And so that's all I have to say about it. I'm tired of seeing people die from this. I'm tired of seeing the abuse on the Black, the brown communities. I'm tired of seeing that Black women tend to be the most educated in the country with the highest levels of debt. I'm tired of all that. So whatever we got to do, pick somebody else that has more of the intellectual thoughts on it, and you'll get a better response.
No, thank you so much. I mean, it's a great because, Dr. Newfield just gave this wonderful breakdown exactly of how this can be done, what are the benefits of it. And, you just bring it home with, and I'm reading in the chat all of these incredible and harrowing stories of student debt. And one person mentioned the stress of debt as well. I can't help thinking what brilliant researcher is out there that could help us with develop a COVID vaccine that either can't be in an educational institution right now because they can't afford the tuition, or are burdened so much with student debt that they can't concentrate on the vital work that needs to be done in this pandemic. I know so many people who never made it to college. I myself have not finished my graduate program because of finances. And so, this is a barrier to the social goods that Dr. Newfield talked about. Dawn, did you want to say one more thing before we move on?
No,
Okay, no problem. Pam, I just wanted to see if you want to weigh in on this issue as well. She's still on. Oops. I'll just ask her to unmute, see if.
Hi. No,
Hi.
I just agree with Dawn. I mean, everything she said verbatim.
Okay.
I second that.
Thank you very much.
Okay. I'm sorry. I'm in a Zoom meeting for work, but.
Okay, no problem. Thank you very much for joining us, Pam. So finally, we're going to get to the question of the moment. What do we do about it, right? There are many organizations that are tackling the issue in many, many ways and from different angles and standpoints. A couple of them have already been mentioned here. The Debt Collective, Dawn and Pam doing great work. Dr. Newfield mentioned KUKFA, the Council of UC Faculty Associations, which is also a part of the Student Debt Coalition, Constance and Eric. And finally, Freedom to Prosper, which is one of the organizations that has helped to support all of this research and these studies that are being done that show both the economic impacts of student debt and the benefits of canceling student debt. And that's what we are. The Cancel Student Debt Campaign is a coalition that has come together as pretty much a loose network of organizations that are trying to tackle this issue together. And we want to help organize, aggregate, and provide a space for coordinating these efforts into a big national effort to get student debt cancellation once and for all. So I'm just going to mention a few of the things that we have on board that are available for you to plug in right now. A couple of actions that can be taken. Number one is contact your representatives. We did a letter drop. PDA coordinated a wonderful letter drop. I think it was something like 260 offices. Was that, Alan? That urged people to sign on as a co-sponsor to HR 3448. That's how Alma Adams, I think, got onto the co-sponsorship of HR 3448. So that's one that you can do. Write down that number, HR 3448, look it up and send an email to your representative to sign on as a co-sponsor. The other thing is also to sign the petition. So I'm just going to share my screen one more time here. Freedom to Prosper has a petition here on, and you can look at this. You can just also look up Freedom to Prosper student debt petition, but it's on, and this one is a major national petition that you can add your name to, that goes right to our elected officials to say it's time to cancel student debt. So you can sign that petition as well. Debt Collective, I know, is also composing a public letter. Dawn, would you like to speak about that?
Yes, and if I could just take one giant step back, I just want to say, I'm a student debt striker. We are responding to this by going on strike. We are building a debtors union. We want to continue to encourage individuals to get informed, find ways to protect yourself, and go on strike. Stop paying the debt, debt resistance. That's the name of the game. In addition to that, we do the pen strokes, we do the other actions that are necessary, like getting on sign-on letters and whatnot. And I'm gonna, this isn't public yet, this letter. We will be asking groups, organizations to sign on, but I just want to mention some of the demands that we're making in a letter to Biden. Before I say this, I just want to highlight, if you guys want some amusement, go back to the Obama-Biden years when borrower defense, which was enacted by the Debt Collective, when we started launching borrower defense, they created a position in the Department of Ed called the BDSM, the Borrower Defense Special Master. So if you want to, this is what we're looking towards when we go into the Biden era. But we are going to demand that if he gets elected, Biden selects a Secretary of Education that's going to use the authority Congress has today, right now. This is Congress authority had under Obama, Congress authority under Trump. The Secretary of Education has the authority to cancel all student debt. They can cancel some of it, like Warren showed you guys in her plans. They can cancel all of it. So that's one of our demands, is that they get an education secretary that will actually use their authority to cancel this debt. We also demand that an appointed assistant secretary of education dedicated to enforcement around different things that play out, like especially like the oversight of private student loans, law breaking, debt collectors, loan servicers, things like that. Then also appoint an assistant secretary dedicated to racial justice and racial equality. So this letter will be made public at some point soon. It's not yet, but the strike, building a debtors union, signing on to these letters, debt resistance, debt resistance, debt resistance. That's what we're up to.
Thank you, Dawn. And I just wanted to mention Thomas, who also works with us from the Debt Collective in the Cancel Student Debt campaign. Put it in the chat. If you want to sign on as a debt striker, it is the URL is strike.debtcollective.org. They said there are many involuntary debt strikers. I would say that 1 in 4 of people who are behind are involuntary debt strikers. Let's make it conscious, and let's make it a vehicle to free us all from student debt. Thank you very much. Let's see. I think that's all we got. So if let me ask also to open it up to Dr. Newfield and Pam if there are any other resources that people can do to join the fight for student debt cancellation. We've got a few more minutes here, so feel free to say any last thoughts.
Is Pam there?
Pam has left already. So
no, I'm here.
Oh, no, you're here? Oh, okay. Sorry.
Yeah. Now, what was the question? I'm just holding my son down for an X-ray. What was the question again?
Oh my goodness. Just what can people do to plug in right now to the fight to end student debt?
I would say go on to debtcollective.org and join the collective and find out what you can do in your area to do a student debt strike, or start in a group that can speak to it. Just, advocacy and hit the pavement. Because I think, it's an old cliche, but I think the squeaky wheel gets the job done. And the more people that are talking about it, protesting, going on student strike debt, and contacting your senators and your legislators. The more people that do that, I really think that we're going to be successful.
Thank you so much, Pam. And
you're welcome.
As you can see, you are a fighter and a warrior right now, holding it down for your family and for
I'm multitasking.
Thank you so much.
You see, I got my little X-ray thing on.
Right on. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Dr. Newfield, if you have any last thoughts, Eric also put in the chat the link to sign on or to learn more about the details of the public higher education in California that he mentioned. Is the link is 66fix.org. That's 66fix.org. All right, go ahead, Dr. Newfield. Last thoughts? Well,
I just completely agree with what Pam and Dawn said, and I really love the strike energy of the discussion that we're having, which as I said at the top, I think is the thing that's really going to put this over the top. I want to say a nerd thing to end with, because that's really what I am. I'm not an organizer. We often think that we have justice on our side around debt cancellation and around free college, but the economics are on the other side, and it's not true. The economics are also on our side. Economic efficiency argument, there's a whole range of them. They all back up free college. They all back up strike debt cancellation. So I just urge people to be informed about the details of finance. It can be intimidating. I'm happy to help anybody who's interested in this personally. There's a lot of good information out there about this, so that when we engage with other people, we have the total confidence that we should have, that we are right and we are just, and that the two are going to make us invincible.
Thank you so much, Dr. Newfield. And again, you can contact him. Go to 66fix.org as well to look at the details of this. Many of these studies that show that the favorable economics of student debt cancellation are available at freedomtoprosper.org as well. Go to debtcollective.org, join the strike. And also, again, thank you very much to our hosts, Progressive Democrats of America at pdamerica.org. Thank you so much. And we're so thankful to join you all today and fight on, progressives. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Meleiza Figueroa, and just a huge prop to Meleiza Figueroa. That was the most incredible graphic. It was spectacular. You and Andrea Miller from the Center for Common Ground get the absolute award for the clearest informational presentation we've had in Progressive Central. So thank you so much. I also want to give a big shout out to Pamela Hunt, and also say something I think that is really, really important because of what we see Pamela doing. And it's very human, and it's what we have to realize is going on in American society. Think about how prohibitive the debt pressures that are placed on people, the need to multitask, the need to work extra time to even come close to making ends meet, keeping houses over our heads, keeping food on our table. And then how do you remain politically a participant in a democracy, let alone a representative democracy? We have to work, everybody has to work, so that people from whatever class, from whatever community, have equal voices, politically empowered within our society. And folks, if you think that's a reality now, you're tripping. It is not. We have a long way to go, and everyone who is a progressive has to double down and commit. We need to see people running for office from every sector of our society, and that means we need to recruit from working class, poor communities, communities of color, and of course, women from communities of color and women from all communities. And it is a great moment in American history right now when some of our great leaders are now women of color. We do see the torch being passed really this week, right? From Bernie Sanders as the nominal head of the progressive movement in our society and the left progressive movement in our society, over to, in particular, the members of the squad and the allies of the squad. And it is a beautiful thing. And of course, we honor Bernie Sanders for all that he has done. I especially, again, want to honor Meleiza Figueroa for a fantastic presentation. I also want to honor the core members of the organization Freedom to Prosper. While Progressive Democrats of America, convened the Cancel Student Debt Coalition, it would not have happened with the work of Freedom to Prosper. And of course, then our partners, the Debt Collective, Our Revolution, Social Security Works, other organizations that make that up. But Freedom to Prosper is an organization that is funding so much of this research. That was the backbone of what Meleiza's done, and that is informing the student debt cancellation movement. And it's incredible work that's being done. So when you see, for instance, Stephanie Kelton, who will be a guest tomorrow, in her incredible study, you see the Levy Institute's name on it. It's Freedom to Prosper who did it. And Mitchell Stolberg, I think his name again, Freedom to Prosper sponsored that. So these really are fueling the research that's being done on this essential issue, pushing it forward. And thank you to the folks from all of the organizations involved in our coalition. So moving on, Russell Greene is now going to pick up, but he's going to pick up about a minute from now, because we have gotten so many videos sent to us from progressive Congress people, progressive senators, and progressive candidates. And we have to just now run one because we'll have too many for tomorrow. This is a very short one. And Marie Newman is going to be entering the U.S. Congress in a very safe blue district. She defeated Dan Lipinski, one of the most conservative Democrats in the House. PDA supported her as a candidate. And we are now going to hear a short message from Marie Newman, who is going to be a new member of the left progressive wing of the House of Representatives starting in January. Take it away, Marie Newman.
Hello, Progressive Democrats. How are you? Hey, is everybody getting pumped up for the convention? Last night was a great start, right? Hey, I am dropping by today because I wanted to chat with you all about the importance of supporting Democrats that are supporting Medicare for All. As you all know, I'm a fan. It's our most practical path forward. It's an existing program that's working well, and we can roll it out for everybody, right? So today, my big request is, hey, let's get behind our folks that are supporting Medicare for All and propelling it forward. But I also don't want any more time to go by and not say thank you again. Thank you for all your amazing help with my primary. I hope all of you will jump in the general. We still have to get a job done. I have a general election, so hope to see you on phone bank somewhere. Thanks, and have a great day.
And of course, we will be there for Marie Newman. And she's right. There are we got to make sure every one of our progressives wins in what are conceived of as safe districts and districts that are going to be more competitive. And we're going to be hearing, by the way, tomorrow, I believe, from Carrie Eastman, very close race in Nebraska, Alex Morse with a primary coming up. Later this hour, we're going to hear from Senator Ed Markey. One housekeeping note publicly, because I have been too swamped. I'm hoping that we can get in the next panel to the Senator Markey video right at about the top of the hour or just before. A note as I hand off to one of the most inspirational partners that I have and activists that I know on and about the climate emergency and supporting all of the movements for environmental justice in the United States of America. And that is Progressive Democrats of America, Senior Advisor on Strategy in the Climate Emergency, Russell Greene. Take it away. The floor is yours.
Thank you, my friend Alan, and welcome everybody to our panel today. Let me just get this speaker view right. I see Alan. You look fantastic, Alan. It's good to see you. Don't see myself yet. I wanted to start by saying these Progressive Central panels have been remarkable. I've been watching every day, and it really inspires me. And I just want to call out to the PDA team, who I've been lucky enough to work very closely with for since 2007, so 13 years. Thank you to Alan Minsky, remarkable. Thank you for becoming our executive director, Mike Fox, Mike Hirsch, Janice Kay, Dan O'Neill, Deb Skirshin, Dr. Bill, Brian and Kimberly Buchanan, really remarkable work. And then I can see in the screen names of people across the country. It looks like there's 200 people now, and I know we're streaming on Facebook as well, who I have worked with for all of these years. Some of the most remarkable people, dedicated, unflinching. So gratitude is how I would like to start this. And frankly, that is really where I would like to center all of this today. I want to note that I am on the land in the city of what we call Los Angeles, in the city Encino. It is the sacred land of the Chumash, the Tongva, and the Tatavian people. I want to acknowledge that. I also am very quickly, briefly introduce everyone on the panel, and then we'll move quickly. We have, Alan tells me, about 80 minutes. So this is a remarkable, brilliant, artful, soulful, vegan, soulful panel. And I want to make sure they all have time to speak to us. We're going to hear from Tara Haska, who is the attorney and founder of, I think it's pronounced GNU Collective. Rev Lennox Yearwood. Rev Yearwood has been an inspiration to me for as long as I've been a climate activist, practically as the president and founder of Hip Hop Caucus. Jamie Margolin, a real inspiration, co-founder and surrogates director for 0 Hour. Anthony Rogers Wright, brilliant mind and friend for many years, Green New Deal policy lead for Climate Justice Alliance. Zoe Cina-Sklar, programs manager for, partnerships manager for Sunrise Movement. I've just begun to work with her and really very thrilled with knowing her and that she's with us today. Peter Kalmus, climate scientist, author, and activist, and a dear friend of mine, personal friend for many years. And finally, Katie Thomas, policy advisor for energy and environment for Senator Bernie Sanders, and a remarkable leader and force in the climate movement. But before we move any further, I want to just note that we only have an hour, and this is a subject that we could spend weeks on. So how do we have this conversation? I don't want to restrict it. Mostly what I want to do is center ourselves in this moment that we find ourselves in. And it's not just a political moment, but it is. It's not just a moment of science, which it is. And it's not just about the upcoming elections, though it is. And I want to make sure we move outside of language that is familiar in the climate movement, which is 350 parts per million, 418 parts per million, 1.1 degrees, 1.5 degrees, temperatures, parts per million in the atmosphere. They're all opaque and vague and disconnect us to really what I believe has to center us. I want to try to center all of this conversation around the sacred. I want to connect us to the earth and to our humanness. That's the objective. But I hope we get to all of everything else that I touched on, and I know through the lens of these remarkable people we will. So in the spirit of locking ourselves, grounding ourselves, I've asked Tara to offer an invocation to begin, and she graciously has accepted. So Tara, if you would.
My name is Tara. I'm Bear Clan from Couchiching First Nation. I'm calling in from Dakota Territory, what's now known as Minneapolis, where George Floyd was murdered earlier this summer. I know that I'm supposed to kind of, I think the hope was maybe for like a land acknowledgement, which to me is something that is a step forward, that folks have started to figure out that they are on someone else's land, that every last square inch of this place that's now the United States is actually Turtle Island. But I also think this is supposed to be a progressive call, right, where we're talking about neoliberalism and actually taking real steps. So a land acknowledgement is words, but I think we're looking for something more than that, which is action. To center ourselves in the earth, to take real steps to stand with our mother, to put all those statistics and numbers and facts and figures into real people, into real faces, into real communities, into real action, not just words. So I'd like to open with that and to thank all of you, and to remember to take a step outside if you can, you know, put your feet on the ground and remember where you come from. So, miigwech.
Thank you for that. Deeply heard and appreciated. I do spend every morning with squirrels, lizards, grass, birds. So to help us ground ourselves in where we are and where we're going, I've asked each of our panelists to tell the story of the last 7 years or so. It doesn't have to be 7 years. They can frame it however they like, but through their lenses, through their unique perspectives. And I've encouraged each of them to share a poem, an excerpt from a speech, or something that they've written, something that grounds them or inspires them. We're all going to try to take about 7 minutes or so that we have time then for some conversation among the group, and then to open it up to questions for you. So if Mike and Alan and everyone can help me just keep track of that time a bit, that would be great. And I'm going to go first. So I've been a climate activist since 1988. I think that's when it started. I saw in the times that Jim Hansen had reported to Congress that we had reached this moment, and he called it the greenhouse effect. And it struck me at the time, I was 28 years old, that we will find a way through this. This is fantastic. Science figured it out, and we'll move forward. But we didn't. We didn't move forward. It didn't seem we were moving forward. So then for me, at the time, I was a singer-songwriter, and so I tried to spread the word as an artist and continued to. And then I became more of a serious activist. And then simultaneously, I happened to be an executive at a large corporation, and I learned about how to move towards this type of climate response inside of business through sustainability, continually trying to increase the urgency. Finally, I felt that it was impossible to really do that, doing anything but that, and I retired from my job and brought my full focus to the climate emergency. And one of our first areas of focus in PDA was to try to convince Bernie Sanders to run for president. And for me, not only was Bernie Sanders an inspiration for many years, but it seemed the most logical path, the most logical and real path to mobilize to address the climate emergency at the scale that was required. Think about that. But to me, that was the best pathway forward. I knew who this man was. I knew his heart. I knew his intellect and his courage. And so PDA set out, not for that reason, but for many reasons, to try to get Bernie Sanders to run for president. Many of you know the story. Steve Cobble and Tim Carpenter came up with this idea that we would petition him to run, and ultimately, through many other organizations, work, etc. But really, something that we kicked off and we're very proud of, he did. And he made remarkable comments about the climate emergency in both of his campaigns, notably in 2016 in the two debates. We talked about it being the greatest threat to national security. And he also talked about thinking about the climate emergency in the context of an emergency and in the context of a mobilization. One of the debates referenced the World War II and how we mobilized as a country against multiple enemies. We continued to try to spread the word. UDC hosted a conference at PDA, People Demanding Action, our 501c4 at the time, put on to try, through Reverend Yearwood's and Andrea Miller's leadership, to begin to think and organize and build power intersectionally. We followed it up at the conference at NYU that Rev Yearwood also helped produce and vision. And simultaneously, we actually got Bernie Sanders to run for president, and I was appointed to the Democratic Party Platform Committee, and I passed in 2016 an amendment that said we're in a climate emergency, the United States must lead, and we have to mobilize on a scale not seen since World War II. And there was a clause that 100 days after the inauguration, we would then have a climate summit where we would develop this mobilization plan. At that point, we knew that Bernie wasn't going to be there, and our focus was how to turn Hillary Clinton into the leader that we needed her to be. Never occurred to any of us that Donald Trump would win and that we would fall back. We were trying to figure out how we would get Hillary Clinton to rise to the moment. But he did win. Thus, the 100-day summit didn't become anything. And we tried to then refigure, reorganize, reimagine how we were going to move forward. Anybody connected to the climate emergency understood that we barely had time, and people are dying and suffering now. How do we wake people up? In Los Angeles, Anthony and I worked together with many other great climate people on trying to put a mobilization plan intersectionally into place in Los Angeles, and we've had some success with that. Others can speak more to that currently. But then there was a moment in 2018 that, for me, really reinvigorated my sense of what was possible, and that was AOC and the Sunrise Movement. And when they sat in Pelosi's office and began to shift this conversation, I felt something fundamental that up to that point I had begun to believe wasn't possible had happened. And everybody on this call has a lot to do with that, and we'll hear from them in a moment. I'll just wrap up by saying we turned that amendment with Katie's help, Senator Sanders' help, the Office of Earl Blumenauer, and great people, into Senate Concurrent Resolution 22 and House Concurrent Resolution 52, which basically said we're in a climate emergency, and listed brilliantly for the world to know, after we pulled out of the Paris Agreement, that the United States understood where we were, and we named it through every lens. We also named the need to keep fossil fuels in the ground, to hold the line. It was bold. There's 103 co-sponsors on that. Senator Sanders also then released, as a part of his presidential campaign, the most ambitious climate platform that I know Katie had quite a bit to do with, that any presidential candidate had ever put forward. We began to think in the real terms of the timelines we had. COVID has interrupted us. We've watched the CARES Act pass with billions of dollars in fossil fuel bailouts. Last night we saw the DNC back out of previous commitments to not attempting removing subsidies from fossil fuels. And now we have this convergence of power of the movement for Black lives, many other things. So how do we move forward from this moment, knowing that we're going to have to fight for a Biden-Harris presidency? Not that many of the people on this call were looking for that, but that's where we are. Possibly Kamala Harris will be the president through some of the most critical years of the climate emergency. There's some new introduced legislation that Katie can speak about, the End Polluters Welfare Act, that is remarkable. So
I'm sorry to interrupt. A lot of people in the chat are having difficulty hearing you.
Oh boy, that's terrible. I wish I would have known that. I'll try to speak louder. Is this any better, Danette? Thank you. So I'll leave it at that. And really, basically, what I'm asking from these remarkable panelists, and we'll go to Tara first, is to tell their sense, from their point of view, from their last 7, 10, however many years they want, where it is we are, what it is, where we're going, what will be required inside and outside of politics to make that happen. So I'll just add, before I hand it over to Tara, a little bit more about her, and then she can fill it in. I'm really honored that she's here, and I thank Katie for making the connection. Tara is a tribal attorney based in Washington, D.C., the National Campaigns Director of Honor the Earth, and a former advisor on Native American Affairs to Bernie Sanders. She advocates on behalf of tribal nations at the local and federal levels on a range of issues impacting Indigenous peoples. Tara, thank you.
Hey, Bijou again. I kind of missed some of this. I've been going to service out here. Isn't great.
Want me to cue you again real quick?
I think it lasts 7 to 10 years and just kind of where we're at, huh? And where we're going.
And what do you think is necessary? What's going to happen? How does this play out from your view? What would you like to happen? How do you imagine it?
I would say, my personal journey has been a interesting one, I think. Came from a town of 200 people up on the Canadian-US border and grew up hunting, fishing, doing all the things, and then found my way somehow into law school as a first-generation college graduate, and then went out to Washington, D.C. to work for the Obama administration, and then eventually to private practice to work for tribal nations all over the country, working on everything from tribal governance to trying to get hospitals and schools for people who are systemically left out of almost every conversation imaginable. People who have the lowest life health expectancy in the country before COVID-19. People who regularly are separated still in courts. I'm sitting in a state that takes our children at a rate of 17 to 1. So I was in all that world and started working for the Bernie Sanders campaign, got to be a lead author along with Katie Thomas, who's on this panel, about what kind of platform we want for tribal issues, what kind of platform could we create? I consulted hundreds of different experts all over Indian country. But then I found myself out in Standing Rock, North Dakota, with the Standing Rock Sioux tribe, and living and working in the prairies and seeing what happens when people advocate in a different way, which is you've done every last thing, you've checked every last box, you've gone through every last process. You're in the judiciary, you're in the legislature, you're in every pressure point you can think of. And they're still going to bulldoze apart your treaty territory. They're still going to keep doing the same things they've been doing since this country was founded, which is dispossess Native people of their lands and act in a way that's unhuman towards themselves, which is destruction of this only home that we all share. What do you do when you're at that point? And I think that is happening in a lot of different aspects of societal life right now. We're seeing what happens when a oligarchical society reaches its peak, which is, you got almost 90% of the wealth concentrated in the top 10%. You've got people who are houseless, homeless, can't feed their children, we're talking about COVID and kids being at home. That was the last panel, right? It was about schooling. What about the kids who don't have laptops, who don't have Wi-Fi, who don't have any of that infrastructure to begin with? What about them? And those are the same kids who I guarantee their families have already been hit by COVID in some way. And their parents went to subpar hospitals with subpar healthcare because of their status in this society. Their their socioeconomic status. That's where I ended up in a place where people were doing something else, and I've stayed in those places. So now I live in the woods. I've been living out in a pipeline resistance camp defending my own territory from the Line 3 tar sands pipeline for the last 2 years, building community, growing food, harvesting, teaching other people how to do those things. And how to live life in a different way while still continuing to advocate out in this.
Tara, I need to tell you that you're breaking up a little bit. So I don't know if you can move to a different spot, but we're losing you.
Societal structure that is quite destructive to people all over the globe. So that we keep of politics and finance familiar with perhaps, but that we also remember and that we learn that we have to really. You're losing me. Is that better? No,
yeah.
without my video. Is this
it's
better?
A little bit better. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that was smart.
Okay. I guess I would just I would end by saying that I hope more of us realize our own place in this world and our own power, that we recognize the power of connecting with our own humanity and connecting with humility and not getting caught up in this world that dispossesses us of every part of our own true identities. I hope that we become empowered with each other and that we build communities, and that even if we are past the point of climate crisis not being able to be averted and the ship is too far on fire to right it, that we are just and kind to one another, and that we love one another and care for one another in a real way. And that includes caring for ourselves. Yeah, I mean, it's at this point in my life, I spend my time teaching others how to live with the earth in a different way. Native people across the globe hold 80% of the world's remaining biodiversity. We're 5% of the population. We've been through every form of genocide, and still many times it's ongoing. But we're still here, and we have a lot of knowledge to share. So, miigwech for the space and for the time.
Deeply grateful, Tara. Thank you for your wisdom and for your spirit and your energy and your guidance. I'm going to move to Reverend Lennox Yearwood. Very quickly, just add that Rev has been a teacher to me, a great teacher, more than he probably knows. He's been remarkably patient with me as I tried to understand the idea of converging emergencies and not just climate emergency. He led us in PD Action, he and Andrea, to try to think intersectionally, and that's why we put on that conference that I alluded to, that he was the keynote and really guided the entire thing. We were in a group together that we co-chaired, which was a great honor of my life, called JAMIN, the Justice Action Mobilization Network, and the Hip Hop Caucus, and JAMIN and others put on remarkable 5 years ago. He is president and founder of the Hip Hop Caucus and a great inspiration to all of us. Rev, thanks for being with us. It's all you.
Thank you for having me, man. I'm so excited to see so many good friends, and my sister Tara. You were breaking up there in the woods, but I wish I was with you in the woods. It looks so much more peaceful where you are. Man, love you so much. Shout out for your great work and getting the governor there to appeal Line 3. You are a true pipeline fighter, amazing indigenous woman who I know hold it down. So thank you so much. Russell, thank you for that, my brother. You know, I love you. And it was great. Actually, for me, I was one of the few people in the room with my beloved brother, Tim Carpenter, may he rest in power, and Steve Cobble. I was there in the room, y'all. when we were trying to discuss Bernie Sanders running for office. I was there. Actually, I think I was kind of like, man, I don't know if this is going to happen, y'all. I was like, Bernie, I don't know. And so I'm so glad that we were able to create a revolution. My goodness, that was powerful. I mean, that was something else. That just shows you the power of people. Looking back on that I'm trying to tell you, that seems just a minor thing. At that time, we were trying to get Bernie to run because we just wanted progressive ideas to be in the conversation. And now look where we are. And so I just want to tell you that we are moving so far. This moment, say a few things. If you can make sure and check me out on The Coolest Show, it's a podcast. I'm honored to do that and interview people like Jamie Margolin, who you're going to hear from, an amazing, my sister and my friend now, who you'll hear shortly, but so many amazing, particularly women and women of color. Our movement can be very patriarchal and be very white. And so it's intentional what we do with Climate Friday and The Coolest Show. But let me just state where we are as a movement. I think that it's important. Russell wanted me to bring something. So I brought my hat of the last time I was locked up. It's some sun there. Oh, you can't really see it in the sun. Man, I got to back up.
There it is.
There you go. So this is the hat my last time being arrested, and I've been arrested a few times, y'all. But the last time I was arrested, I was wearing this hat in January with my dear brother, Bill McKibben, for stopping the money pipeline. I bring that up because I was arrested then in a bank. We must get folks to transition from fossil fuels to clean energy. And we as a movement graduated to looking at how the financial aspect, financial advisors, JP Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, all those folks who are propping up and funding the failing fossil fuel industry, whose business plan is a death sentence for us. And so we were there moving forward and getting arrested in that. But we weren't there. And we were getting arrested with our dear friends, with Jane Fonda and all those in that process on those Fridays. I bring that up is because one of the most important things to me out of all my years of doing this climate work wasn't when we have gotten arrested during Trump, but it's when we got arrested during President Obama's tenure. It was that moment when we were fighting the Keystone XL pipeline, when we said that we are not going to just be aligned with Democrats or Republicans or even progressive. We are going to be aligned with humanity and come with whatever may come. We're going to stand on that principle that we are on the right side of humanity and on the moral ground to stand forward in fighting against this climate crisis. And we got out there on the Ford on Climate. It was one of the coldest days. Some of y'all there were there with me. And we stood there. The first time Sierra Club would get arrested. It's amazing, 125 years they got arrested. But it was great to have Michael Brown and Sierra Club getting on the front lines, and Jim Hansen and Julian Bond was side by side. And we got arrested at that moment at the gates of President Obama. That shook up this movement. For too long, we have been like with the Markey Waxman process and kind of just going along for going along. But it was at that moment when our movement came together and said enough is enough, even for our friends. It was in that movement when our movement changed. That has birthed this one with Joe Biden. That has birthed this one with Kamala Harris. That has birthed this one with all the big greens and organizations finally getting on the side of the climate movement. But this is where we are right now. We are also in a movement for Black lives. And racial justice is climate justice. And climate justice is racial justice. And so we have to connect those dots now. That's going to be a little awkward for us because we're not used to that in some of our places. And we want to kind of skip past that. But I'm telling you, the way that we witness things, we got Black folk and white folk and queer folk and straight folk and gay folk and all kind of folk on the same side, that is when we can win. We cannot win this battle as a siloed, segregated, progressive climate movement. We win this battle when we come together, unified, because organized people beats organized money every single time. And so this is where we are. We have to be prepared for the first 100 days of the Biden or even the Trump administration. If it's Trump, then hell, we're gonna get a lot of bail money. We're gonna be going to jail. We're gonna fight like hell in every single aspect. But it's Biden, we gotta get a lot of bail money and fight like hell because we have got to be on the right side of history. So y'all, listen, this is a critical moment. We got 10 years to make the impact. This is not a game. This is not a game. And so we must come together and unify our movement right now. I'm gonna leave you with this. There's two things. One, Hip Hop Caucus is presenting at the National Black Conference. Please check that out. Go to the Moon for Black Lives. It's M4BL. Hip Hop Caucus will be presenting the climate piece to that. We're very honored to be a part of that. And I invite all you to join us in that. But the next day, that's on August 28th, which is the anniversary of the March on Washington. But the next day is August 29th. And August 29th this year marks the 15th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina. And I want you to join with me on that. Go to Katrina15.com. That's Katrina15.com right now, but be there on that day. And this is why that's important. We found out that the inconvenient truth just wasn't the climate crisis, but also white supremacy. And so we can change that right now and come together and not only defeat the climate crisis, but also white supremacy and do this thing together. If we do that, then we can preserve a world that will have clean air and clean water, because climate change is a civil rights issue. So I thank you, Russell. I thank you, PDA. I love 0 Hour, Tyra, all y'all, but I know we ain't come this far to stop. We're gonna change things up, and Democrat or Republican or whoever, all power to the people. Let's go get them, y'all. Let's go get them.
That was fantastic. Amen. And our people clapping looked a lot different than the people on the DNC program that I watched last night. Everybody looked like they were going to actually jump out of their seats here. Thank you, Rev. Can you hear me okay, Alan? I changed headset.
Yes,
okay.
We can. And just a quick note that, again, if we can get to the Markey video, maybe after 1 or 2 more speakers, and then we'll keep going after that.
At the top of the hour per your request, my friend. I'll take care of that. Thank you. Again, Rev, really remarkable. We'll get those dates out. If we don't have them, I'll get them and make sure that we post them on the PDA website and share them in our emails. I remember saying to you once, after a real disappointing something with the Democratic Party, we should start a new party. And you said, Russell, the far more radical thing to do is to transform the Democratic Party from the inside out. So now we're racing against time, because that's certainly what we've started here. So moving forward, a remarkable leader in the climate movement, Jamie Margolin, co-founder and surrogates director for 0 Hour. PDA has a long history of trying to allow ourselves to be guided by the wisdom of the youth. And I was an advisory board chair for a group called I Matter, Kids versus Global Warming, for many years. And we used to walk the halls of Congress when Chescott Martinez was 12 years old with Tim Carpenter. So this is a remarkable energy, and also part of this remarkable inflection point that has started, where the brilliance, wisdom, organizing strength, and genius of our children. I'm sorry that they have to be in that position, but I'm grateful that they have shown up and are leading the way. Jamie, thank you for being with us. Looking forward to hearing your point of view.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Jamie Margolin. I'm 18 years old. I'm a Colombian American climate justice organizer and co-founder and surrogates director of the youth climate justice organization 0 Hour. As you can see, I literally just moved into my college dorm yesterday, so I'm a bit like, I'm starting film school. I'm quite excited. And I'm a Bernie Sanders delegate at the Democratic Convention. I just cast my vote and I voted against the Democratic Party platform because it would not include Medicare for all. And I voted for Bernie Sanders as the nominee. Obviously, this was not under the illusion that Bernie would be the nominee. I'm well aware that Biden is the nominee, and I'm well aware that the DNC platform is like probably going to pass. But I felt it was necessary to like take a stand for what I think is just and what is necessary. How can we be in the middle of a pandemic and people still think that Medicare for all is unrealistic? It's absolutely ridiculous. So that's really what I've been doing. I'm also the author of a new book called Youth to Power, Your Voice and How to Use It, which is a guide to being a young organizer for any cause, because I wanted to help teach other young people on how to take action on different climate justice issues and issues completely unrelated to climate as well. Because when I was first starting to get involved in climate action, like I just didn't know what to do or how to get involved. And I was 14 years old and I was just scrambling to do what I could, but there wasn't really a guide for me. And so after I kind of learned the ropes, I was like, okay, I want to make sure that other people have some sort of guide, that other young people don't have to scramble the way that I did and actually have, obviously like a book this thick is not going to give you everything you need to know, but it's something, it's something to get them started. So that's really what I'm up to. And right now I'm pretty mad because of everything happening with the whole fossil fuel subsidies thing and the DNC randomly pulling a prank on us, almost like, oh, just kidding. We actually still want to have fossil fuel subsidies. And I find it very infuriating because we are in the middle of a climate disaster. California is really going through it right now, and so are so many other places. I mean, right now we don't really see it in the news cycles because obviously the news cycles are dominated by the election and the pandemic. But there are still so many climate disasters happening. And yet the Democratic Party decided that now is not the time to step up and lead. Now is the time to continue to help the fossil fuel industry pay for their continual destruction of the earth. So that is something infuriating. And so this just means that, obviously we're pushing for Biden-Harris presidency. We do need to get Trump out of there, but that doesn't mean like, I feel like a lot of people, especially like neoliberal folks or like, just kind of centrist think like, oh, we're going to have a Biden-Harris presidency. We can sit back, relax, no more resistance. It's going to be fine. But in reality, this just shows us that we have to be on our toes even more, because the thing that's going to be different about a Biden-Harris presidency is that they are influenceable to some degree. It was like with Trump, like you literally can't push him anywhere. But with them, we're going to have to be on our toes, constantly pushing, fighting to get them to make the right decisions and to actually make the change that we want to see. Obviously it is disappointing that Bernie Sanders isn't the nominee. I was before I was a delegate at the convention for him, I was a surrogate for his campaign. And the thing that I love about him is like, you don't have to pressure constantly for him to make the right decision. We could just trust that like he would. But right now we don't have that luxury, unfortunately. So that means that the work is just beginning, and we have to be on our toes and constantly be vigilant of things like the DNC randomly pulling some tricks about continuing fossil fuel subsidies. And we have to be really on top of it. And it's really exhausting. Because like, for example, I wanted to just enjoy moving into my college dorm and being a kid. Obviously, there's not much. I am quarantined for 2 weeks until I can actually do something. So the coronavirus is a factor, but I mean, like, I just wanted to, be able to relax and settle in. And then the DNC decided to do this, and now I'm scrambling to see what we can do about it. And so the reason I bring this up is because a lot of young people are trying to, live our lives, like, just because all of these events are happening, the coronavirus, the climate crisis, all of the stuff that with the elections, but we're still kids, we're still going through school, we're still going through life, we're still trying to figure things out, we're still, trying to combat loneliness and figure out ourselves. And it's been pretty frustrating when I'm like, you know what, today I'm just gonna take a day to just be a kid and organize my dorm and figure some stuff out. And then some stuff goes down and I have to hop right back into being like political Jamie. So I think that I've seen a lot of, especially like recently, a lot of glorification of youth activists and like, oh, the youth are going to save us all. And I really appreciate the support, but I feel like that sentiment of like, shove it all on the young people, they can handle it, when in reality, we can barely juggle our own lives and like just trying to make it through each day. So I think I'm really a big believer in intergenerational organizing and intergenerational movements where the adults learn from the youth and the youth learn from the adults, and we can support each other and be with each other. Because it is a lot with the climate crisis and everything happening to just thrust it onto the shoulders of minors and young people who are just trying to figure out our lives. But we are needed in these movements, and it is important to include us. So that's why I'm a big believer in intergenerational organizing and movements and doing this together, because I've had very strange experiences where a governor or a senator or someone at like a very, very high level of office will be like, your generation's going to save the world. Someday you're going to grow up and be a governor, and then you can take action. And I'm like, so you're telling me that someday I can be in the exact position that you are to do what you should be doing now? Like, it's just, I've had so many instances where people whose job it is to like solve the climate crisis, take action on these issues, will then be like, oh, someday you're going to fix it, which is not very, I think they think it's a compliment and they think that they're being nice, but it's actually quite a cop-out of like the actual responsibility that they have, because they are in the position of power right now. My generation, you know, I'm 18, so my generation will not be in those positions for several years from now. The climate crisis, we don't have several years. By the time that people my age are old enough to be in those positions of power, it's going to be too late. And so politicians need to stop with the fake patting on the head and actually take the action that our generation needs and save lives, because the climate crisis is not something that might happen in the future, that will happening. People are dying right now. People are hurting right now. Communities are suffering right now. And it is really a privilege to say, you know, fighting for the future, because that means that you're not someone who's experiencing right now. Like, yes, we are fighting for the future, but we're also fighting against the damages happening in the present. So those are just some of my thoughts. It was a really great, interesting experience being a delegate at the convention and trying to do the best that I can. And it's pretty frustrating to know that I guess a lot of leaders in the DNC are making things harder than they have to be. Like, it's so common sense to stand up against, for example, fossil fuel subsidies, and yet they're almost going out of their way to try to be like, what can we get away with here? And it's so frustrating, because if you want to be known as the good guys, then you have to act like the good guys, and you have to actually, like, I just can't get over the whole thing with the fossil fuel subsidies and the refusal to pass Medicare for all and all of these things. And I think with over the past several years that I've been an organizer, I've kind of learned that people and leaders go out of their way to make the wrong decisions and to make things harder than they have to be. And I think a lot of these things are common sense, and Medicare for all, climate action, these are common sense things. People love to say, oh, the radical left wants this. The radical left wants Medicare for all. Oh no, the radical left wants climate action. But the word radical really just means getting to the root of something. So we are radical in the sense that we want to get to the root of the problems that are plaguing our society. And the way we get to the root of the problems with our healthcare system is changing our healthcare system and making sure that everyone has healthcare. The way that we get to the root of the climate crisis is to take urgent action, divest from the fossil fuel industry, and do everything we can to save our generation's lives and futures before it's too late. So that's just my 2 cents here. I'll put the information about how you can stay in touch with me, read my book, or be in touch, work together in the chat room. But just for those of you who are watching on Facebook and don't see the Zoom chat, if you want to connect with me after this, see how we can work together, build some cool stuff together. My social media, you can reach out to me there. It's just Jamie Margolin on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. If you would like to read my book, Youth to Power, you can go to www.youthtopowerbook.com. That's the main book website. So you can go there and you can pick your bookseller, so you don't have to order through Amazon, because Lord knows Jeff Bezos doesn't need more money. He's doing just fine. He doesn't need any more. So yeah, that's how you can connect with me and how you can read my book. And keep up the great work, everyone. The fight we have a lot to do and it can be really exhausting, but the great thing is that we have each other and that we're not alone. So when one of us needs to rest, the other one will have our back and be taking action. And when they need to rest, then we can take action for them. So that's the wonderful thing about having a community. So thank you so much, everyone. Keep up the great work, and the fight isn't over. It's just beginning.
Thank you, Jamie. And before we move to our next speaker, did you possibly have anything you wanted to share in terms of excerpt or a poem or something? Got Rev's hat.
Excerpt of a poem about a certain theme specifically, or just an excerpt of a poem?
Oh, was it, if you care to, I've asked everybody if they'd like, if you don't want to, or you could do it later after the others. Something that grounds you, something that holds you center, that you look to, whether it's something you've written, somebody you admire has written.
Well, for me, the quote, Audre Lorde's quote about self-care being a form of like political resistance is a quote that really grounds me, because I will often go into a place where I neglect my own physical and mental well-being because the movement needs it. And then I realize like I'm not much good use to the movement if I am not like fed and taken care of and mentally okay. So it's interesting for me. The only way to motivate myself to take care of myself is like, it's literally strategic. Like if you take away the part that it feels good and it's common sense and logical, the fact that like we have like it's the strategic and logical thing to do is to take care of yourself. Otherwise, you're not going to be in this movement for a long time. So I'll paste the exact quote in the chat. I forget the exact one, but I always go back to it. It's Audre Lorde's take on self-care and just saying how it is a form of political resistance, and self-preservation. So that's really a quote that grounds me and reminds me to treat myself like a person and not like a work robot, which I tend to do sometimes.
Powerful. Thank you so much for all that. I have so many questions for you and so much I want to tell you about, but we'll leave that for another time, I hope. And we're at the top of the hour. So Alan, let's go to our message from great Senator and climate champion Ed Markey, and then we'll move on and look forward to hear from Anthony Rogers Wright.
Great. To progressive Democrats of America, our moment has arrived. Justice is on the ballot this year, and justice will be on the floor of the United States Congress next year. We need environmental justice. That is the Green New Deal that I introduced with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. It's Medicare for all, so that there's health care justice for everyone. That is an absolute unavoidable and necessary thing that must happen for our country. We need criminal justice in our country, including abolishing qualified immunity as a protection against police officers murdering innocent people in our country. We need economic justice. There's something fundamentally wrong when 3 billionaires have more wealth than the bottom 50 percentile of our population combined. That is obscene, and we must end it. It is absolutely wrong. On each and every one of the justice issues that we are seeing all across our country, at the core of it is a structural racism that is built into our society. It is fundamentally built into our education, our healthcare, our economic, our criminal justice, our environmental system in our country. So from my perspective, that's what this is all about. And that's what progressive Democrats are leading on in this country, changing the dialogue, changing the way people view these issues. And we are going to be marching next year to pass the laws that finally need to be on the books. This is our FDR moment. After the Great Depression, there was a need for incredible change in our country, and it happened. Well, we can see the kind of change that is necessary right now, and we are going to get it done. So thank you for everything you do for our country. Thank you for your leadership. And I apologize to you. I've been out campaigning all day. I'm in front of my house right here. But I just wanted to make sure that you got my message, that I'm proud of you. And I'm honored to be able to partner with you. And we are about to have a revolution in this country, and it's going to be led by progressive Democrats. So thank you so much for everything you are doing for our country.
And Russell, thank you so much for making the time for that. I'm going to toss back to you for 1 minute, but I'm going to say too that I forgot to say at the top of the last hour that just to let everybody know, PDA is putting this on as a free public service. Please donate whatever you can. Our staff has worked nonstop for 10 days to pull this together when we realized no other progressive organization was going to step up and provide both a supportive role to the need to elect Democrats to defeat Donald Trump this fall, to build the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. So we scrambled and put together what I think is a truly brilliant conference with great panelists throughout. Please donate what you can. Also, we will put a link into, and this is the way we work as a PAC, a way that you can support both Senator Markey directly and simultaneously support our efforts to re-elect Senator Markey and have him win his primary. He is a much more progressive candidate than Representative Kennedy, who's challenging him. He's been a true champion of the environment, as we know. So we fully support Senator Markey, and we will put that link into the chat as well. Please donate what you can. And back to you, Russell Greene. Thank you.
Thank you, my friend. Really honored to have Anthony Rogers Wright with us. He's the Green New Deal policy lead for the Climate Justice Alliance. But to those of you who know Anthony and those who are about to hear from him, he's a remarkable person, a remarkable human, expansive as a thinker, as an artist, as a father, son, friend, activist. He's remarkably direct, no bullshit, yet remarkably poetic. He's been a great teacher of mine as well. I'm grateful for all of the work that I've been able to do with Anthony, and I'm honored that he's here. Anthony, all you, my friend.
Thank you so much, Brother Russell. I'm obviously extremely honored to be here. Brother Yearwood, I love you. Every time I hear Brother Yearwood speak, I just want, it should all be pay-per-view. He's an incredible human, and I haven't seen him in some time. I miss him. Jamie, thank you for what you continue to do. And before I'm going to thank my two other sisters, my de facto chiefs of staff, in Katie Thomas and my dear sister, Tara Hauska. We call ourselves the Three Amigos. And I think I'll tell the story in terms of where we are, where we need to be. And as Russell said, I'm from Brooklyn, so I might drop some F-bombs. I apologize in advance. That's just how we do it in Brooklyn. But I want to tell the story of how I got to Bernie Sanders. And I think that it starts with a quote that I love from the venerable James Baldwin, who said once that the truth that sets Black people free will also set white people free, but white people have had a hard time swallowing this truth. And I met a sister in 2015 who clearly had taken the throat lozenger to swallow that truth, and that sister is Katie Thomas. Katie Thomas reached out to me to talk to me about Brother Bernie, and asked me and saw an article that I was featured in the Atlantic or something, where I gave Bernie a C in environmental justice. Now, Katie's going to say that I gave him a lower grade, but I would just like to contend that I dropped out of law school and Katie didn't, which means that my memory is better than hers. That all said, Katie called and asked, hey, can we talk? And through that first discussion is what's created to a lifelong friendship and an instillment of progressive values. And it was also right around the time that I met my dear sister, Tara Hauska as well, and also was a proud surrogate for Bernie in 2016. And like Russell said, even in 2016, that was the most epochal climate policy platform that we had ever seen in the history of the United States. And that's extremely important when something that we always have to remember and always build off of, because as Sister Jamie just said, when we got the news yesterday, for me, I feel where Sister Jamie's coming from, because I was really, really hurt. And then I got extremely just angry at this party. Just think about what they basically said is that they are against stopping the payment to an industry that commits slow genocide of indigenous people, environmental racism against Black people, choking out poor white folk in Appalachia. And only the Democratic Party would be behind policies that actually disproportionately hurt people who tend to vote for them the most. And that's why progressives are needed at this time, because that is how out of just sync with reality that this neoliberal corporate party has become, as it has fleeted away from the days of Franklin Delano Roosevelt and more importantly, Eleanor Roosevelt, and of course, a brother who got screwed much like Bernie did, and one of my favorite Democrats, Henry Wallace, right? It's very, very similar. And when you consider that this same Democratic Party that right now, the nominee, okay, is a brother who instituted a criminal justice plan that was so bad that it also disproportionately impacted people who tend to vote for the Democratic Party and take away their votes in some cases for life. This ought to say that everything that we've been seeing right now has been extremely interconnected. So you're going to hear from Sister Katie soon, and what I'm asking for, and it builds off of what Brother Yearwood said, is that what we really need to realize is that if we're talking about this idea of climate justice, right? Sister Tara said it, that the indigenous people have wisdom. What I would really love white progressives to do is to not just hear that, but to embrace that. There's a lot of external proclamations being made right now, as we all witness. There was no denying the lynching of George Floyd and the lynching of Breonna Taylor. As a matter of fact, one of the last times that I saw my sister Tara was in Minneapolis. She came down from her action camp. I came up from Omaha, Nebraska, where I'm currently in Seattle Purgatory until COVID. And I'm there, and we met there, and the idea that really rocked this nation was the coming together of Black, Indigenous, white, Latino, Latina, poor, because it just woke something up. We've been looking for that for so much time, coming from the front lines and indigenous communities as it pertains to our white environmental comrades. And one of the beautiful things, if there is a silver lining to all of that despair and all of that pain, is that it was a catalyst for getting white people to see what front lines and indigenous people have been saying for so fucking long, is that we have the solutions and we need you to help us scale them up and scale them out. This is why Brother Bernie Sanders will always have a big spot in my heart. I'm going to tell you about a woman who Katie knows as well. I almost get teary-eyed when I think of her. Her name is Catherine Coleman Flowers. Catherine Coleman Flowers comes from one of the most incredible places in the world for Black liberation. I know Brother Yearwood knows what I'm talking about. Lowndes County, Alabama. This is a county that Kwame Ture, formerly known as Stokely Carmichael, and of course the greatest natural organizer of all time, Ella Baker, organized in a rural Black community and created the Lowndes County Freedom Organization, which ipso facto is the first Black Panther Party. And I would also add, because we were talking about women's suffrage just the other day, that the Black Panther Party logo was created by a Black woman, and that's what's up. But that all to say is that Miss Kathy brought Bernie down to Lowndes County. And this is one of the most impoverished places you've ever seen. A UN envoy came to Lowndes County and said it is the most impoverished place in a developed nation that he has ever seen in his life. Wastewater flowing back into people's homes, a form of hookworm thought to be eradicated in the 19th century came back, and now in the advent of COVID, it is a hotspot. But Brother Bernie went down there. His heart has been changed, forever, which is why he had Miss Kathy on his Biden Bernie Unity Task Force on climate. This all to say is that the type of work that we have to do if we really want to address this climate crisis is not so much about 1.5 degrees, rejoining Paris climate accords that don't even respect indigenous sovereignty anyway because of Article 6. As Sister Jamie said, not understanding that this is an intergenerational and intergenerational fight, not scaling out the wisdom of the front lines, which, by the way, led to the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act in New York State, and hearing in New Orleans just today that the governor of Louisiana has committed to net zero emissions by 2050, which is nothing to jump up and down about yet, because I'm not into net zero, but that's fucking gangster. And that's because of people like Dr. Beverly Wright and Dr. Robert Bullard and Colette Pinshaw Battle. These solutions are coming from the front lines, and us coming together is going to be the biggest victory that we can really unleash. What we've been seeing this summer, we have to decide right now as a progressive movement, was that just a moment, or is it just a moment, or is it the beginning of longstanding and perpetual momentum? I swear, and I really hope it's the latter, because I want to read this Thomas Paine quote, and I'm going to end on quoting a white man, and I apologize in advance for doing this. So, but Thomas Paine said that there are the times that try men's souls. Thomas Paine was a patriarch. I apologize. That try men's souls. What we obtain too cheaply, we esteem too lightly. It is dearness only that gives everything its value. The harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph. And so, what I'm saying is that the glorious triumph that we need to maintain, Black, white, indigenous, Latino, Latina, Asian, poor white folk, women, men in this time, the best way and the only way that we are going to defeat this climate crisis, whose root causes are white supremacy, patriarchy, and colonization, is by coming together and rocking the country through a multiracial, working class enigma and just like beacon that we have already seen the glimpses of. Bernie sparked it. He collected the kindling for us. Okay, us, the people, we lit the fire. It went out a little bit because Bernie had some issues with Black outreach, but we're going to fix that together, and that's how we're going to build upon Bernie's legacy. Okay, so that many times years from now, when Bernie is ready to take his last breath, he's going to say, I did the right thing. I started this, and the people finished it for me. So I love all of you, and thank you so much for giving me this opportunity.
Anthony, thank you for that beautiful, beautiful presentation and centering. Quickly, I'm going to pivot and say no more other than to introduce Zoe Cina-Sklar from the Sunrise Movement. We're running late. She has to jump quickly. Zoe, I'm sorry to jam you up like this, but please take as much time as you have before you have to go.
No worries. So grateful to be here with all of you. It's such an honor to share this virtual stage with many people who are movement heroes to me. So just happy to be here and grateful for the work of Progressive Democrats of America. I think I'm in this moment seeing how much has changed. I entered the climate movement about 7 years ago at a time when it seemed impossible that we would pass any meaningful climate legislation, at a time when divestment seemed far-fetched, and when the debate was, will we have a carbon tax or will we have cap and trade? And that was the moment we were in, and that's transformed. I entered this work through the lens that there was either inside game or outside game, either being out on the streets and pushing, or being inside and working with the politicians. And what I've seen in the past years is just the extent to which these two can be melded, and the extent to which we as activists have a responsibility to be pushing so hard, to be sitting in, to be blocking streets, and that we also have to be voting, and that we also have to be electing people who will actually champion the issues we care about. And I'm seeing how that energy, which was really just an idea, is infectious, and how the squad is growing, and how we actually have a mandate for change. And of course, we have this mandate because so much is broken. We have a mandate because we're seeing Black and brown folks murdered in the streets, because we see mass employment, because we have an out of control pandemic. And we also see that because of our collective power as a movement, we're able to change the conversation. So certainly, like, Sunrise endorsed Bernie. Sunrise is not a huge fan of Biden, and we've seen him adopt many of the planks of the things that we were pushing for: investing in frontline communities, increasing ambition, increasing timeline on climate. So we've seen those huge shifts. And we've also seen that these shifts are only going to happen if we push. As Jamie and Anthony both mentioned, we saw this backtracking on subsidies, which was just so gross. How can we be paying fossil fuel CEOs while people are struggling to feed their families and struggling to survive? And we also saw that Biden immediately distanced himself from that, saying, look, I too oppose fossil fuel subsidies. And he's not doing that because he's good, because he's like doing that for that sake. He's doing it because we are putting pressure on him and we are holding him to it. And we have to demand more too. So we have to be demanding that his advisors are not tied to the fossil fuel industry. We just put out a petition this afternoon calling on Biden to keep anyone with ties to the fossil fuel industry out. We can't have advisors who are, advisors like Ken Salazar, who literally is defending fracking companies who caused an explosion that killed people. We can't have those people who involved in shaping policy. And we also can't stop at the ballot box. As Sunrise, we're doing a lot of get out the vote work. We're launching 5 programs to support young leaders in getting out the vote and mobilizing for Green New Deal champs down ballot and also defeating Trump. But we know that our work is going to continue far beyond Election Day. It's going to really be about what happens on Election Day when we defend the results and what happens after, when we stay on the streets and mobilize for transformative change, for a Green New Deal and for Medicare for all. So that's the work that we're doing. And I'm feeling hopeful. I'm seeing a lot of people, the speakers on this call and politicians like Biden, like saying that there's going to be change, that we can have the biggest climate investment that we've ever seen, that we can move that money to Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities, to working class people, and to really transform our society and address the interlocking crises of racial injustice, of climate change, of economic inequality. I think that we together can push for that. And it's just going to take all of our movements coming together as movements of movements, and also just determination and being willing to push and know that it's not about the politicians, it's about us. And there's a lot of strength and a lot of energy and a lot of young people out there and ready to move. And I'll close with a thing that inspires me. So Sunrise was founded with a set of principles which guide us and hold us. And those are on our website. I can just drop that in. But the last principle is that we shine bright. So just going to read that for you all. So it says, we shine bright. These are hard and sad days, to be sure. This isn't easy work. But we strive to bring a spirit of positivity and hope to everything we do. Changing the world is a fulfilling and joyful process, and we let that show. So thank you all. I'm really grateful to be here with such a great group.
Beautiful. Thank you for the strength and the light, and for being with us today. I'm looking forward to our work together in the future. I'm going to shift now to a close friend of mine for many years. I can't remember when we met. I think it's 2011, Pete Kalmus. Pete is a climate scientist and an author, a great author. His book, Being the Change, is a great book. And he's an activist. There aren't a lot of climate scientists who are activists in the way that Pete is, full-hearted. He's actually a great musician as well, an astrophysicist, climate scientist, a man who learned how to beekeep, how to compost, how to do everything that would allow him to become what he thought the change would need to be. Not that he thought any of those things would change the climate emergency, but it would begin to change him and how he thought of the climate emergency. So anytime I ask him, he always shows up for me. I'm very grateful, Pete, for everything you do and for you being here today. Floor is yours, my friend.
Yeah, thanks, Russell. It's so good to be here with this fantastic panel and with all of you guys. So I'm a climate scientist at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. I'm speaking on my own behalf as a citizen, as a father of 2 boys. They're heading into 7th and 9th grade right now, and as a human. And I was forced into activism. I didn't want to be a climate activist, but the science is so terrifying to me that I couldn't not speak out. And I'm sitting here in Northeast Los Angeles right now. It's a pretty intense heat wave. There's fires burning all around. It's when the wind blows from the wrong direction, it's smoky and I can barely breathe. And, as bad as you think it is, I think it's probably safe to say that it's even worse than you think. What we're seeing now with all the climate-related disasters, not just heat waves and wildfires, but the storms and the floods and the agricultural impacts and the climate migrants, this is going to get worse every year for years and years and years until we stop burning fossil fuels, and even for some time after we stop burning fossil fuels. And one thing that I don't think the public understands really well enough is that these changes these geologic scale changes that we're imposing on our planet are irreversible. The longest time scale for recovery for what we're doing right now is biodiversity recovery. I mean, coral reefs are dying. That's an area of my own personal study at NASA. The sequoias are dying. Ecosystems around the planet, marine ecosystems, land ecosystems, wetland ecosystems, species are dying. And the time scale for biodiversity recovery stretches for 10 million years. And the heat the global heat that we're kind of imposing right now by this energy imbalance from burning fossil fuels, that's going to last for thousands of years, which is many, many, many generations. The equatorial band of our planet is already becoming harder to inhabit. And with the rise of humid heat, that's going to get worse. And that's one of the things that really scares me is there's 1 billion people that live in that band around the equator. Where are they going to go? And by the way, as you know, they've contributed the least to this emergency. So I see this as a genuine emergency. Part of my activism is just saying that over and over again and trying to let the science kind of inform my emotions. And then when I present information about this crisis, to not just present factual information, but also to present emotional information too, so that I don't give the impression to the public that we have this under control and that business as usual can continue and that we can just keep flying for vacation and flying for business and that incremental changes will fix this. They won't. We need a radical, rapid restructuring of society, like the Green New Deal has been suggesting, and even beyond the Green New Deal. Technology alone isn't going to save us at this point. Renewables alone aren't going to save us. They're one piece of this 500 or 1,000 piece puzzle. But the thing we need right now is radical restructuring of society. And the way we're going to get that is by building an immensely powerful climate movement. We need 1 billion climate activists. We need everyone from all races, from all genders, from all age groups, indigenous. We need people of color. We need poor people. We need privileged people. We need everyone speaking out. We need this to go beyond national boundaries. We need to help other nations instead of putting up walls. In my opinion, this is easily the largest and most difficult challenge that the human race has ever faced. And I'm heartened that about 2 years ago, I've been a climate activist for 15 years, and there was a huge transformation 2 years ago. The science became more urgent and more clear, and the climate movement experienced an exponential explosion in its power. One thing that hasn't happened over those 2 years is somehow it hasn't really transferred into political action. So it's the political leaders around the world now, they're starting to talk right. They're starting to say, this is an existential crisis. They're starting to say, we need change, but they're still producing more fossil fuels than ever before. They're still planning to produce more fossil fuels than ever before. And as we saw in the DNC, it's even unclear that we can get them to agree to stop giving taxpayer handouts to one of the richest industries this planet has ever seen, which is killing us all. All right, that's a no-brainer. And I wish I could say I was surprised with the news yesterday, but Tom Perez shut down climate debates within the DNC. Before that, President Obama, he instead of latching on to climate as his legacy, he latched on to fossil fuel production. He said we're producing more oil now than at any point in 15 years, and we're producing more natural. We've become the global leader in natural gas production, and he was very proud of that. We saw Nancy Pelosi speak disparagingly of Markey and AOC's Green New Deal as the Green Dream or whatever. So I wish I could say that I was surprised. The problem here, to me at least, is that both major parties right now are controlled by corporate money. Much of that's coming from the fossil fuel industry, and that's been plaguing our ability to make change for decades. And we need to find a way to break out of that, which is what was so inspiring about Bernie Sanders' run, right? So I was a delegate for Bernie Sanders, and I was a huge booster for him, which is really unusual within the climate science community. I took a lot of heat from that because climate scientists aren't supposed to get political. We're not supposed to speak out like this. But I am desperate, and I saw him as a potential way out, and we got so close, right? And then the corporate wing of the party shut it down because they were afraid of losing that financial support, and they were afraid of pissing off their donors, right? I see what we're doing here as a task of cosmic importance. I just can't overstate that because of the long-standing, how long these transformations are going to last on our planet, how pervasive they're going to be. We're not going to get away from this, right? This is the only planet we know that has life, and the life is riotous. It's beautiful. It's sacred. There's nothing more important to do with our lives right now than be climate activists. And I'm trying to get everyone to see that and to make this their top priority, not just as voters, but everything they do outside of voting, in their workplaces, in their schools, in their writing, in their art, in the candidates that they campaign for, right? We need to transform this, and it's happening. It's not happening fast enough, in my opinion. So let's boost it. I guess I'll end. I wish there would be time for discussion and questions, but I'm not sure there will be. But so I'm going to end with a passage from my book. By the way, I'm at Climate Human on Twitter. I put my book online for free. If you go to my website, peterkalmus.net, you can read it. And because I just want to get all I care about is getting this message out. I don't care about, how many followers I have or how much money I make. I'm donating all the profits from this book, not that there have been any. But so the last chapter I titled Love, which is kind of weird for a climate scientist, but I do everything I do out of love for my kids and for the rest of the beings on this planet. I study coral reefs because when I read about them dying, it hits me in the gut. And they're just like these weird alien things, these solar-powered animals. They don't know what's happening. They don't know why the oceans are getting hot. They don't know why they're dying. They don't have a voice. So the epigraph for this last chapter of my book was by an amazing young woman named Sophie Scholl. She was a resistance fighter as the Nazis were coming to power. She was a pamphleteer, and she was executed by the Nazis when she was 21 for speaking out against them. And I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that this is the fight for our lives. It's going to get worse. It might get darker, especially if Trump wins. But a lot of us are going to engage in direct action. A lot of us are going to get arrested. And I hope that the dark authoritarian powers, we hold them at bay so that it doesn't get even worse than it is. But here's what she said, right? These were her last words before she was executed when she was 21. She was guillotined by the Nazis. So she said, "The real damage is done by those millions who want to survive. Those people who roll up their spirits into tiny little balls so as to be safe. Safe from what? Life is always on the edge of death. I choose my own way to burn." So I urge you guys to choose your own way to burn, to be courageous. And this is the fight for our lives. And let's unify, let's support each other, let's help each other, let's regenerate each other, and let's do this.
Magnificent. my brother Peter, thank you for that. And everybody, thank you for staying with us for this full hour and a half. We still have a remarkable voice to hear from, and I'm not sure if there's any time beyond that for question and answers. I'll look for Alan and Mike to guide me, but I know we have time for our final speaker, and I'm deeply honored that she's here and she helped put this panel together as well, and she has helped the progressive movement in many ways, and certainly she is a shero of the climate movement. Katie Thomas is policy advisor for energy and environment for U.S. Bernie Sanders. She's an attorney, policy advisor on climate, energy, environment, tribal, and territory policy. She's been in the Senate office for over 5 years and was the lead architect of Senator Sanders' campaign platforms, as I mentioned at the top of the hour, that were transformative in 2016 and 2020. Katie, really interested in hearing your perspective, being so close to all of this inside the halls of Congress for so many years. Thank you for staying till the end.
Yeah, thank you everybody for joining us and for staying with us so long. I will try not to speak too quickly, but I'll try to get through what I've been invited here to speak about. Let me start by saying that I'm here in my volunteer capacity. I am not here to speak on behalf of the senator, and everything I say during this session are my views. So I also wanted to, I think the question that we were given is, what's the best case scenario if we're able to take the White House, the Senate, and the House? Right. And this is a conversation that makes me extremely uncomfortable because I'm very superstitious. So I'm going to knock on wood. And then I'm going to say that I think it's important that we do think strategically about what kind of context we're going to enter into after from Election Day. So starting on Election Day forward. And I think it's awesome that I get to end the conversation this way, because I think that our work is really truly going to begin on Election Day. In that scenario in which that outcome happens, it's going to be important that we immediately make it clear to the Biden-Harris administration and to all incoming into the incoming 117th Congress that we fully intend to hold their feet to the very real fires to make sure that we get robust climate legislation. And one way I think that we could do that is to have the resolution that Senator Sanders, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and Representative Earl Blumenauer put together that lays out what the climate emergency is and gives, similar to the Green New Deal resolution, targets for what a plan from Congress and a plan from the administration would have to look like in order to avert the climate emergency and to make it clear that we're in it now. Rev was really clear, and he told us we have 10 years, right? We have 10 years to get our stuff together. But you know, that we're in the emergency now, which is like why we only have 10 years left. So that messaging sometimes can get confusing, but I think like coming in, especially making it very clear that we really believe that this is an emergency. We are not going to be waiting to get the ball rolling on climate action is something that'll be really important. And I invite you all to think through the context that we will be in. In 2008, when Obama was coming into the White House, the economy had just tanked. And what was passed was a very pro-corporate package in TARP. And also a pretty awesome spending package in ARA. So we're seeing a little bit of that play out again in CARES. We're seeing some of the money that was intended to go to small businesses and average American families ending up somehow in the pocket of the fossil fuel industry. And some, though clearly not enough, social spending. So I think it's fair to look back on lessons learned from that time and make sure that we're not repeating any mistakes and that we kind of see that as baseline, as like basic, that was already done in 2008 and that the version of a stimulus that we need to put together on day one of a new administration, I think we have the ability to really start there. So I think people should really be thinking about what your ask or what your demand would look like in that world, and to see that as separate from climate legislation. Because I think you'd want a green stimulus. You'd want to make sure that our stimulus is climate friendly, of course. But I also think that the more we can shape that as something separate, then there's another bite at the apple politically to get to work on some further legislation. A couple of people have mentioned the squad. I think that the squad pressure is real. I got to be in a staffer and watch kind of everybody lose their stuff when AOC made it to the Hill. And I think it's real. And so I'm looking forward to having even more work colleagues to get into even more good trouble with. And so I want us to remember that we have some power here. And I think that that is very evident in the way that the Biden-Bernie task force plan, while not perfect, you all know what I think the plan should look like. It's that Bernard Sanders. But like that plan brought Biden and a lot of the Democratic Party way to the left than they had been before. So the point behind that is that we can have all the most beautiful plans and you can put out what you think it is, but until you have a movement of people making sure that there's accountability to what's in that plan, then it's meaningless. And the same is true when we're legislating. It's not like you go cast a ballot and then we're done. We cast a ballot and then we stay very engaged in making sure that our members of Congress understand that we fully expect them to come together with a plan that is going to rise to the moment that we're in. What else? Another example that I was thinking of that came up earlier is the Waxman Markey example. So love Ed Markey so hard, love that guy. And in the past, there was a very technocratic, cap and trade, very industry related plan that was sold as how we're going to solve the climate crisis. Well, now he's the guy behind the Green New Deal. And the reason for that is the movement. The reason for that is the people who, like Rev, have forced us to see the intersection between race, housing, justice, and climate change. I mean, these fights are all interconnected. So the people are what can bring us from having climate change legislation look like a carbon tax to something that it understands that we're going to have to look at literally every single piece of our economy and revolutionize a future that we can all live in. Beyond that, I would just point you to a couple of pieces of legislation that I think are obvious choices for early on in the Congress. My boss and Representative Ilhan Omar, who also won her primary for re-election, introduced the End Polluter Welfare Act, which would end all fossil fuel subsidies, royalties, leases, benefits, which is, according to Oil Change International, is up to $15 billion a year. Did I just say that correctly? Yes, I did. Thank you. And we also just introduced the Fracking Ban Act with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. That would be just simply a ban on all fracking across the country. Of course, that's similar to the Keep It in the Ground Act, which Senator Merkley had led in the past. Bernie and AOC also have the Public Housing and Green New Deal Act, which would retrofit and rebuild all of our public housing all across the country. And I could keep going, but I'm going to end there. And the last thing I'm going to leave you all with is to encourage you to look at the Climate Equity Act, which is Representative Grijalva and Senator Kamala Harris. And this bill was really uniquely put together. I wish more legislation happened like this. And to be clear, Senator Sanders is co-sponsoring. It was a process of bringing people to the table and really hearing them and working out a slow, intentional process of making sure that the grassroots were heard and that the people whose lives this is really going to impact are the ones who are being consulted at the beginning. So I think that also seems like a pretty obvious choice since Kamala Harris, out of the two of them, kind of has that climate cred coming from California. And so it wouldn't surprise me if that kind of stays one of her roles. And I think we have a lot to be thankful for in that way, and some ways that we can use where she already, you know, put herself out there and hold this administration and to those kinds of policies. So I can talk all day about the bills and what's in them, but I really came here to just thank you all for all the work that you did all through the primaries, to thank you for all the phone calls and all the door knocking and everything that you all have been doing. Please know that this work does not end. And so on behalf of all of Team Bernie, you know, we really look forward to continuing the work with you. And I think that starts by getting the Biden-Harris administration elected and then to hold them accountable. Thank you. Yeah, I'll get a list of bills too, Russell.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah, and Russell, keep going.
Two quick questions. The third bill, we're on all of the other ones, including the Kamala Harris. But so the EPWA, the fracking ban, and what was the third one you mentioned, Katie?
Public housing and the Green New Deal. Okay. It would retrofit all public housing in the United States.
Great.
I have literally like a list with all the links to like the press release and the text of the bill and the summary and all that. So
Great.
I'll just
love to follow up with you and make sure that we're aligned, because you know one of the things the PDA does best is our Educate Congress platform. We did get to 103 co-sponsors before COVID interrupted us with a lot of your help in the House, struggling a bit in the Senate. But I'm glad to hear you think that that's still something to pursue. I'd love at another time to talk more about this strategy and perhaps also hear what you think the Select Committee report means or doesn't mean. But before I let you go, and then I want to check in with Alan how much further we can go. Did you happen to bring anything that you loved that you wanted to read or share?
This is one of my favorite coffee books. I grew up in Colorado, but I went to law school in Vermont, and then, of course, now work for a member who represents the great Green Mountain state of Vermont. And so getting to work for people who are so connected to their environment is a job that is a part of my job that I feel very blessed to be able to lean into, and then obviously getting to visit Vermont all the time. So we like to joke there are 3 seasons in Vermont. There is the fall that all of you have heard of. Can you see that? I think so.
Yes.
What's that?
Beautiful.
No? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's fall that you've all heard of. Winter, of course, is absolutely gorgeous in Vermont. You must really see it sometime. And then jokingly, what we call mud season. And that's everything from March to September. Mud season. So the nature, the beauty of Vermont remains something that I am still very inspired by and still feel very grounded in.
I want to go there, visit you and represent, and Senator Sanders. Thank you for that beautiful presentation. Alan, how are we on? I know that we're way over. We still have 100 people or so. I'm not sure what panelists are still with us.
You have many more people watching still on Facebook, and you have 143 people in the room, and keep going as long as you like and as long as people like. I just thought every single presentation has been fantastic, and I want to thank everybody who's contributed. And take it away, Russell. I do, of course, I'm getting nudged for people to remind people to please donate, remind people we're doing this for free. And of course, also, if they can, to Senator Markey's on the link that we put up there earlier, I'll put it in again. And please donate what you can. And take it away, Russell. This is a phenomenal panel. And I wish we did have the opportunity for everybody to catch their breath for a moment and have the panelists talk amongst themselves. I know time is limited, but every single panelist was just absolutely brilliant. So thank you all.
Very lucky. Well, I think what I'd like to do is I want to read something of my own on behalf or in honor of my mother, whose birthday or anniversary of her passing is tomorrow. And then I'd like to just open it up to anybody in the panel who would like to say any closing comments, and then for questions for anybody who is able to stay. So give me a second. I'm opening my computer with a little bit of trouble. So instead, while I look for this, oh no, here it is. Thanks for bearing with me. let's, while I'm having a little trouble here, I'm going to move and open it up just to the panel for a couple of minutes to talk to one another. Anything you'd like to say or respond that you'd like to add on your own, or that you'd like to share in response to anything you've heard from one of your allies?
I just want to say that when I grow up, I want to be Katie Thomas. And having allies like that in ivory towers like DC is what makes our jobs as front lines and grassroots a lot easier. Kudos to the lawmakers, but and I'm sorry for cursing again, the lawmakers aren't shit without their staffs and without people like Katie Thomas. Like, all the stuff that you hear about would not even be moving. You have no idea how many phone calls this sister has to take and like how many people she has to apologize to and whatnot, but does the work. So don't just it's not just what's happened, at the top. It's like the people who make those people, and Katie is one of those people. So I just wanted to say that's who I want to be when I grow up.
Katie.
Well, I want to be Rev Yearwood when I grow up. I like this game. We can do this all day. There's lots of people in the district that I've learned of. And actually, that's what I picked up was when Rev Yearwood was mentioning. Do we still have Rev?
Rev, you with us?
Do we have anybody from Louisiana who wants to talk to us about how we should be talking about the Hurricane Katrina anniversary that's coming up? That seems like a pretty
important,
huge deal, especially because, just the way that NOLA recovered was not awesome.
Anybody want to comment on that? You can start to raise your hand. I think Mike Hirsch and Mike Fox are monitoring that. Anybody else that was a panelist who's still with us who might want to add anything or respond to Katie?
We can ask Rev for more.
I found my poem, and then if that's the end, we could certainly go, and I'm just going to share it. It's from a book that I wrote last winter before we then moved into the first 3 months of the year to try to push Senator Sanders to victory. I paused on this book, but it's from a book called Confessions of a Climate Activist, Songs of the Final Century. And I was going to read a different poem that I wrote for her, but since we're at the end, and I'm feeling this sense of inspiration from these remarkable people and all of the energy from PDA and all of the remarkable activists, I want to end with love, as so many of you have spoken to. The poem is called What Wins Today? What wins today? Joy or suffering? Love or hate? Joy wins. Love wins. Push it. Intend it. Don't wait for it to come to you. Reject hate, even the smallest amount. Give love. Rain love. Gently. Silently. Loudly. Mosquito bite it if you have to. Bee sting it if need be. Rub it in. Slap it on if you must. Cough it, sneeze it, shout it, and note the fastest way around the world. Feel it. Alan, I'm going to hand it back to you unless anyone from this panel has anything else they'd like to say, or there's any questions in the queue, Mike or Mike.
Well, thank you, Russell. And I, every single panelist, I just so look forward to working together. Every kind of political trajectory and initiative that was outlined by every panelist is something that I'm looking forward for PDA to be able to work with. I do think that there are ways in which so many of our issues get siloed, and to unsilo them, to bring them together is absolutely essential. And of course, in every way, shape, and form, to have the environmental degradation that people experience on a day-to-day level be addressed. Of course, corporate America has dropped so much of this, and infrastructure has not been provided for poor communities, particularly poor communities of color. We've reached a point, I think, that maybe I've felt my entire life, and I've always aspired to keep it foregrounded in my thinking, that America is blocked by the reality of structural institutional racism. For every humane reason, for every reason of justice, that has to be tackled and addressed, confronted, and real progress has to be made and equity has to be achieved. And
the realities of the legacy of white supremacy in the country are alive. And, you just have to take something even as banal and obvious as I heard Professor Gerald Horne speaking yesterday, and he broke down the way the vote is going to go because, so much of it is predictable. The question then is turnout, he was saying, in this upcoming presidential election and national election. African Americans are going to vote at a 95 to 5% clip for the Democratic Party. The question is turnout. Latino vote could swing from 70% to 60%. I'm quoting Professor Gerald Horne here as best as I can verbatim. European Americans in the Southeast and the Confederate States are going to vote 9-1 for the Republican Party. That is absolutely the core of the Republican Party, and it's absolutely rooted 100% in the history of racial oppression and white supremacy. And white Americans outside of the South, he had the number. And of course, these are going to adjust a few percentage points here and there with every voting block that he's describing. And we all know, predictably, that's the election. That's where it'll be fought out in 2010. And again, at the heart of the division is the history of racist oppression in the United States. And so I think it's absolutely essential for the climate movement to foreground environmental racism, environmental justice issues, absolutely, along with the work of carbon in the atmosphere, the reality of this existential crisis to all of humanity. The two are interrelated. The United States of America does remain even weakened compared to 30, 40 years ago, the hegemonic power in the world. It has Peter could speak to this, I believe, the absolute lion's share of university research capital in the world is within the domestic United States of America. We had the earlier panel on education. One of the perverse facts of contemporary American society is because of underfunding and so on, compared to many other technological industrial countries, we have a mal-educated, almost through social engineering, intentionally mal-educated domestic population. And yet the university system is absolutely centered within the domestic United States of America. And so we have the capacity to do, that is one component of what we have to build towards and fund and use federal funding for, is research capacity, to bring up the capacity of the energy systems to be responsive to what the population will. We can't delude ourselves. Demand, which is the maintenance of all of this technological and industrial, post-industrial infrastructure so that people can continue living the way that they are. We can predictably believe that that's going to be the appetite politically of the American domestic population. And then again, but what Peter says too and speaks to about the community of scientists, and it's very, very, very important for us to organize there. Sorry to go on so long, but this is so inspiring to me, and I don't mean to just go on too long. But lastly, I'll just try to conclude with this. We actually saw played out in a very distinctive and profound way a battle between market capitalism and science and medical science around COVID, the reopening up of society, or what is medical and scientific truth, which is that we needed to shelter in place, we needed to stay at home, we needed to save our lives, we needed to save the lives of the people who are in frontline communities, again, radically disproportionately from communities of color, which of course the American power structure has so often not given a damn for and continues generally to not give a damn for. We have to find a politics that completely reverses all of this. But again, we saw this play out, science versus the forces of market capitalism. And so the scientific community, it is a distinct community that we need to forge bonds with. We need to respect fully their findings and propagate them out. And it's a blessing to have you, Peter, as an activist from that community with us. And that's all I'd like to say so much on every front.
Great. I'll just note that, of course, the difference is people feel a sense of their actual life being at stake in the COVID situation. Yeah, so there's great analogy to climate movement, except that our big problem is that many, even of our best progressive activists, think the distinction between believing in science is enough. And we're way past that. There's an opaqueness to the reality of how close this tipping point is that we have to bring forward, that you hold it as sacred as Peter brought it, Tara brought it, Katie brought it, Anthony brought it, Lennox brought it. Hold it, connect to it, because once you do, you know what to do. If you're not fighting against this every day, I promise you, and I don't mean this as a judgment, it's just my observation. I'm almost 60 years old. You're disconnected from it, because once you connect, and it doesn't mean that you have to be overwhelmed by it. This isn't terrify yourself. This is empower yourself by centering yourself in the truth as you know it and the answers that are in front of us. And that's how all of this energy that is converging, that Anthony spoke to so beautifully and Rev spoke to, becomes stronger, and we move it forward. So I want any closing comments from anybody on the panel before we just say goodbye. It's been a real honor and inspiration for me. Thank you for everybody for joining us. Anthony, anyone? PDA?
See you on a phone bank soon.
Yes, see you there. Yeah.
What did she say?
See us on a phone bank soon. Yes.
Yeah, exactly right.
We'll be there. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's what I was going to say. Find out how to social distance campus. Do not take this for granted. And Californians, you have some pressure to put on too, in case we have to replace the senator. So let's make sure she is a good one.
Oh, great to see. Thank you so much,
Wait,
Anthony.
got a couple of other
great to see
people
Tara too.
Alan, I think Tara and Peter unmuted her. Did you want to say anything?
Yeah, can I say something real quick? Over the next few years, I think one of the critical areas for us all to work is to start building a vision of what success looks like and feels like for everyone. So I'm not just talking about Green New Deal. Definitely that's part of it, but I'm also talking about things like a growth agnostic economy, and then maybe eventually even a culture that, that doesn't think that our species has dominion over everything else. And so how do we get there? What does that look like? The details, right? What would it be like to live in an economy that put people over profit, right? That put our well-being over GDP, for example, right? But what would we be bartering for food? Would we have factories? What would it be like in practice? I think there's a lot of work to do to vision this out.
Thank you, Pete. Tara, did you have the last word for us?
Yeah, mine actually my comments work well with what was just said. Mine was I hope that everyone on this leaves feeling emboldened to be brave, to take heart. And, one of the most important things really that I see is learning how to listen. There are already people that are living in those communities that you're talking about. There are already people living those ways and those lifestyles. We've been doing that for thousands and thousands of years. So the answers are there. We just have to learn how to listen and not to commodify and commercialize every last aspect of human life. So miigwech to all of you.
It's a beautiful place to end. Thank you, Alan, Mike, PDA, all of my guests. Thank you for being with me.
Actually, if I could say too, I hear Tara 100%. And of course, what I said in some respects about maybe the political realities of the domestic American population and the drive for the technology to save us coming out of universities. It really is important and it's essential for us to elevate the voices from communities who are living in harmony with the earth. And that is something that really PDA needs to get out in front of too, because I'm certainly not going to sell anybody on modern living and have my heart believe that this is the best way that humanity should live. I think we live all too alienated from nature, and to get back into sync with that would be beautiful. And what Tara just said is so on point. And to elevate those voices is something PDA is also going to do what we can to commit to. So thank you.
With that,
Russell, it's Dr. Bill. Thank you so much. Alan, can you tell everyone what we can expect for tomorrow's?
Tomorrow, we have gotten so many right now videos from Congress people and candidates going forward. We had to slip in the Marie Newman because the Jamie Raskin was too long. And, we got so many, we'll have those all spotted throughout the day. But we have the panel on economy and labor. And then we go over to the general closing plenary, which will include, which is a real blessing, a video of Jesse Jackson with John Nichols, is introduced by Steve Cobble. We're expecting that. It's still coming in, but we've been told it's going to come in. And we look like we'll have live, by the way,
we had our Markey by video today, and then we're going to have Alex Morse live tomorrow, we hope. He, of course, is one of the remaining candidates, progressive champions, who's challenging a very conservative Democrat, very, 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 very powerful and very conservative Democrat, Richie Neal in Massachusetts won. And there's been some controversy and some confusion about things that have come out of Massachusetts one. And all I'll say right now is the more information I get, the better Alex Morse looks. And he looked great before, and the worse Richie Neal does in the establishment branch of the Massachusetts Democratic Party that Neal's connected to. So we're really going to be excited about having him be there. Again, we may and should have Nina Turner with us. We're going to have Michael Leidy, Bill Fletcher Jr., both members of the PDA Advisory Board. I can't off the top of my head just list all the various videos that we're getting coming in from the Congress people and the candidates. And I know in the first panel, we have economist William Darity, Stephanie Kelton. We have a number of union leaders. Yes, it's just going to be an incredible day, final day of our plenary. And people are going to be looking forward to how we build the progressive movement, both inside and outside the Democratic Party. Thank you.
Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Be well.